Welcome to Design This, on the Dieline. My guest has co-founded several cannabis companies, including Bloom Dispensaries, Tryke companies, Reef Dispensaries, Ignite Cannabis Company, and Green Axis Capital. Now he is cannabis industry's advisor and co-founder of the metaverse Cannaland. My guest is Matt Morgan. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thank you for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're a bad man. I'm just reading through all the accolades. You've done a lot. Very impressive.
I've been a busy boy. I've been grinding for 15, 16 years straight.
Wow, man.
Yeah. I'm 37 since I was 20, so 17.
You started at 17?
No, I'm 37. I started when I was 20 is when I kind of became a little entrepreneur. I dropped out of college after 10 days and kind of fumbled around for a little bit and then found my calling as, building companies.
10 days, you were like, I've had it.
Bro, I figured out traditional education wasn't it. Real quick. I got my education from... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's fun that you say that because I think that's like our whole next generation. I think there's a lot of question about traditional education and the fact that education hasn't evolved significantly.
No, it's archaic. I got my education from books that I chose to read and from mentors, people I looked up to, people I aspired to be like. So I started reading, I read a Tony Robbins book called Awaken the Giant Within when I was 12 years old. Made me start really reevaluating everything, how it worked. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 16. Then I read Think and Grow Rich when I was 18, and How to Win Friends and Influence People when I was 19. And I was like, all right, this, the traditional way of thinking, inside the box, go get a degree, get on the hamster wheel and call it a life. Like that wasn't it. And this is before social media or anything. Like the first text was sent socially, like when I was a senior in high school. So I didn't have any of the stuff the kids had today. Like the internet was even very infantile. Like when I graduated high school, we didn't use it that much. So, when I was a kid, the teacher would go around to class and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Kids would be like a doctor, an astronaut, a lawyer, a scientist. And nobody ever said, I want to be an entrepreneur. Nobody knew what that was. So, now you go in a classroom of middle school or whatever it may be and ask a kid, I bet you 80% of that class says they want to be an entrepreneur. But, that's due to social media and everything else. So I'm just, I'm like an older millennial. I'm 37, but I'm glad that I was able to kind of help lead the charge and trailblaze and give exposure to all these kids of what's possible without traditional nonsense and the conformity that they put you in from a young age.
Wow, that's a great perspective and a great starting point for this podcast, because we're going to be jumping into some very futuristic, and we talk about the future, but it's really today, right? So I'm really interested to hear what you say about some of the work that you're doing, especially in the metaverse.
All right, for sure.
I'm gonna kick things off just to tell our people a little bit about Cannaland, but I'm really excited to hear from you on this one. So,
all right, cool.
The Cannaland platform, it's powered on the blockchain, and it allows instant purchases of real estate, land parcels, NFTs, as well as other digital assets using Cannaland Tokens, a cryptocurrency providing transactional utility within Cannaland. So talk to me about how this came together and what you're looking to do to stand out in the metaverse.
So I've always just been on the cutting edge, no matter what I'm doing. I like to disrupt verticals. Cannabis, I got involved in 2008 when I was 23 years old. I said, this is the next big thing. Nobody believed me. 10 years later, I built $1 billion in cannabis companies. So, and I used things early on, like blast text messaging, email lists. I treat it like a real business, and I was blasting my database all the time to generate sales. Then I went onto social media and I was a very young CEO. So I started leveraging social media very aggressively before anyone else was. I started getting guys like Wiz Khalifa and Burner on my squad, and we started leveraging their followings. So I was just always kind of a young operator, young CEO, and I was always using the latest and greatest technology, to where the older guys that were in their 40s, 50s, or 60s were kind of still stuck in the mud, with the traditional ways. Again, it's innovation always wins. So as far as Cannaland, so they asked me to speak at a cannabis conference, which is nothing new, but it was during August of 2020. And they're like, yeah, come and speak at this thing in front of thousands of people, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who in the world is having a conference right now? This is crazy. I'm like, what's the dates? They're like, oh, it's from September to December. I'm like, what? There's like a 4-month conference. This is
September
stupid.
to December.
So I call them. I'm like, yeah, I'll be a keynote or whatever. And they're like, yeah, all right, just build an avatar and we'll see you in the metaverse. I'm like, what is going on here? So I did the avatar. I'm in my sweatpants at my house, just chilling. And I start cruising through this cannabis conference. It's in this island, like on this like floating thing. And I'm like, it's in digital. And like, but
All
I'm
right.
going up to the vendors like I did a normal show. It's the same vendors. And I start talking to people with my microphone. It's the same people I know at the real show. It's just a digital version. So then I get up and I give a speech in front of I don't know how many people, a lot, and it was all digital. I did it with my sweatpants. I'm like, dude, this is the future. I was like, we
Good.
gotta start building. I was like, we got to start building virtual
This
reality
is it,
dispensaries,
baby.
like some VR. I was like, people
Mm-hmm.
need to start shopping in this Web3 immersion, and it wasn't there yet. Nobody was talking about the metaverse, but it was like my first glimpse into what this could become. So
Mm-hmm.
we just started chopping it up with some different bankers and whatnot. And they were like, let's expand on the idea of a virtual reality dispensary. And why don't we do a whole cannabis world? And I'm like, all right, cool. So, that's how it kind of came to be. And it was an idea back in 2020 and it finally came to fruition in, late 22.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think it's going to change the game, bro. I see what Amazon did, right, with their delivery model. They crushed traditional brick and mortar retail, and
Mm-hmm.
this will be no different. I don't know if you shop for cannabis online, but it's a miserable experience in today's world. And
Yeah.
30% of cannabis sales are done online, and that will only increase. So instead of looking at little thumbnail pictures that you can barely see what it is, and you're ordering something on a faith, you'll be actually immersed in a virtual dispensary and you'll be able to look at the products that will look very, very close to what will be delivered to your house.
Yeah. And there's something to speak about, taking those in real life experiences and translating them into a virtual experience because like you said, they can feel really similar. And it doesn't mean that everything that you do has to be in a virtual experience, but it can be
Yeah,
efficient.
no, I grew up in the 90s, right? I'm a 90s kid. So there was like
Mm.
not a lot of technology. And I cherish those moments when there was no technology. But this is just the way the world's going. And so I like to
Yeah.
get in front of wherever we're heading. And whether we like it or not, buckle up. We're going digital. And so this solves a lot of real world problems too. I don't really do a business
Mm.
unless it solves real life problems. And there's a lot of real life problems in the call it the real cannabis world now.
Let's talk about some of the problems that are being solved. So take me into the cannabis experience or in Cannaland, right? So you get into Cannaland, there's an opportunity for you to learn more about the
Yeah,
strains and the
so
weed that you're buying. Go for it.
So like there'll be education, right? I get asked millions of questions about cannabis. So you can go to your little cannabis university. There'll be classes on anything under the sun that you can think of: how to bake cannabis brownies, how to grow weed, the different genetics, how they affect you differently. Indica sativa, pharmaceutical grade versus medical grade versus recreational. The different, the different studies going on in Israel and beyond. Like I want people to have access to all educational format of cannabis, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to learn. And a lot of times people don't even know where to go to find that information. So we're trying to create
Mm-hmm.
a cohesive environment inside of Cannaland where you can learn anything you want about the cannabis plant. From there, you can go and take tours of digital cultivations that look very close to what a real life cultivation would look like. People are always intrigued with, the back end of a cannabis operation and how that works. They're just so mesmerized by fields or by indoor space station looking cultivations. So we're gonna allow
Mm-hmm.
people to kind of tour what that would look like in a virtual format. You can we're going to have entertainment and concerts. Maybe it'll be like a Willie Nelson or Snoop Dogg or something like that for entertainment purposes. And obviously, you'll be able to go into your favorite dispensary or your favorite branded store, depending on what brand you love, and just shop, man. Just pick up pick it up, look at it. It'll feel very real life. And you fill up your basket. You can talk to a digital bud tender for as long as you want, which will be another real person sitting at their house behind a computer. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll change the game. I mean, like I said, when I first started in this game, nobody shopped for cannabis online. Now one out of every three people does it online. So I see that trend only continuing, and I think that trend will accelerate if there's a more immersive shopping experience online for cannabis products.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that education piece is probably the most critical because what you're doing is gamifying an experience and people are learning so much more and so much faster and it doesn't feel like school. right?
Yeah,
And
especially when you're
then
learning about something you love. You know what I mean? It's more of a passion thing. Like
yeah.
I hate learning about things I don't want to learn about. Like those are problem with school. They're like, you got to take a class in this. I'm like, I don't want to learn about that. That's not going to help me in the real world.
Hmm.
But you have to get these credits. I'm like, no, I'll go get my credits elsewhere. So I started spending a lot of time at Barnes and Noble and just read the books that I wanted to read to acquire certain skill sets.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, man. So Cannaland, I think it's going to be extremely disruptive to the digital cannabis space for sure, which will translate over to the brick and mortar cannabis space as well.
Absolutely. So let's spend a little bit of time there in the translation between like what's happening in Cannaland and how that impacts like real life. And
So,
because a lot of people think that what happens in the metaverse is, stays in the metaverse, but
no,
talk to me about
I
that
think we're
that
bridging
translation.
we're bridging the gap between real life and the metaverse. I'll give you some prime examples. Banking for cannabis operators is a nightmare. FDIC doesn't allow large banks to take cannabis deposits, so all the big banks you can't bank there. You have to find a state chartered bank or a more of a localized bank.
Hmm.
This will allow banking because the currency is actually the Canna token. So
Hmm.
you can,
Mm.
you'll be using that token as the currency inside of Cannaland, where the operator will have a wallet and they'll be able to accept Canna tokens, and hopefully we can stabilize the price on the token and everyone
Mm.
becomes happy. Another thing, marketing and
Let's
advertising. Go ahead.
I was just gonna spend another second on the tokenomics behind Cannaland because you mentioned the token, right? So
Yeah,
for people that are listening and don't necessarily understand crypto or tokenomics or this kind of thing, the Canna token is a token specific to Cannaland, but
correct.
um it allows you to make transactions within the platform. And then so talk about so you have a certain amount of you invest into the Cannaland token, then you have a certain amount of Cannaland tokens or Canna tokens, and then you're able to use those to make transactions within Cannaland with those things that you have to offer. And then so what happens after that? So you have the
So
Cannaland token, you make the
there's
transaction.
actually back end providers now that will switch from crypto to fiat within a second's notice. So there's credit cards that you can use cryptocurrency on in the real world now because they can flip back and forth between fiat and crypto. This will be very similar on the back end, and my goal is to actually have a Canna credit card over time that you can use in dispensaries. So you could use your Canna token on that card inside of dispensaries. But we're
That's
that's
it. That's
aspirational,
the
right?
one.
So if
Yep.
that would fix the whole financial issue within cannabis, but for now,
Hmm.
let's say that all right, you transfer Ethereum, Bitcoin, stable coins over to Cannaland.
Hmm.
You can then convert those into Canna tokens, and you can use the Canna token inside of Cannaland for anything, whether you're going to a concert, whether you want to pay for classes, whether you want to get some digital apparel, whether you want to buy a parcel or land inside of Cannaland and be someone that hangs out there all the time, build some cool structure, a
Hmm.
house, whatever it may be. You want to go into a dispensary or a branded store, maybe you want to go to Stizzy's store, for example. You go in there, start shopping, build a basket, and then use Canna tokens as the currency to purchase that. Those Canna tokens will then transfer
Hmm.
to the owner of that store, and they can keep it as
Hmm.
Canna tokens, or flip it to a different token, or flip it into fiat. And that
Hmm.
I believe should streamline the financial issues within cannabis. I got kicked out of a lot of banks when I was doing cannabis because I was running such high volumes. And
Hmm.
when I was doing 9 figures in revenue a year, they kicked me out of every bank because I was operating in multiple states. So I was running a cash business, doing over $100 million in revenue, and I had 500 employees. So I had to do payroll in cash. It was a nightmare. So I don't want anyone to have to go through those issues and the security of it. You have 10, 20, 30 million bucks on you or in your facility. It's very dangerous. And so I think it's criminal how the government's treating this and not offering regulations to help with banking and other things.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, one of the things that we talk about is adoption. This is in crypto in general, right?
Yep.
And how the adoption curve in different countries, how it's doing here in America. Um, and not to compare Cannaland to Meta, but there was an article recently in the Wall Street Journal about Meta's Horizon World,
Yep.
and they were just saying how it's gaining little consumer interest according to internal documents. They hope to reach 500,000 monthly active users, but by the end of 22, Horizon World only attracted less than 200,000 users so far. So
So
I wanted to ask you about Cannaland's adoption and what do you think we can
yeah,
do better?
so I'd like to address all this. First of all, I don't think we're ready from a mental or a technological standpoint to fully dive into a metaverse type of situation as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're
Yeah.
mentally adapted or fit for that yet. I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone doing it now is very early. Like Decentraland, for example, my buddy built Decentraland. And they have the Mana token, right? So that this a lot Cannaland will be with the Canna token will be similar to how Decentraland operates, but there's not a whole lot of users in Decentraland at any given time. The
Mm-hmm.
reason is, what are you doing in Decentraland? What real world problem are you solving in Decentraland or in Meta? What besides
Mm-hmm.
hanging out in a digital format? There,
Yeah.
what we're doing with Cannaland is we're offering a better version of an online shopping experience. If I have the
Mm-hmm.
option to just go to some company's website and click on some little thumbnail pictures and pray to God some good product shows up, or I can immerse into a digital world where I can go shopping and actually see a very good representation of what I'm going to be getting, I'm going to pick the one that's more immersive because
Mm-hmm.
you're actually shopping for a real product that's going to get delivered to your door that day. Similar to Amazon. Amazon's still very web too. It's very flat. Eventually you'll go through digital worlds on Amazon and pick out your stuff there too. But
Mm-hmm.
we're just not there yet. So I think it's going to take some very aggressive marketing on Cannaland's end. I think it's going to take some really cool representing videos to get out there to the masses through social media and other outlets to show people like, hey, there's other ways to shop for cannabis besides just clicking on some different menu items like a sushi style or going into your favorite dispensary, where a lot of people don't like to go to dispensaries anyway. I know a lot of high powered people
Mm-hmm.
that like send their driver or put a hood on, or they just don't want to be seen going into a dispensary. It's not the right look for them.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to run some very creative marketing to try to get user adoption. I do think over time, many people end up in a metaverse type of environment, but I think solving real world problems with a Web3 installation is much more impactful than just saying, "Hey, we create a metaverse, come hang out, guys." I like
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm so heavy into like the new play to earn gaming, because it
Yeah.
allows people to be in these. It's like almost a proof of concept for the metaverse, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's showing how an NFT actually operates as an asset. It's showing how cryptocurrency is a real currency inside their virtual world. So it's almost like a test or a use case for what the metaverse can become. But there's a real reason you're playing, because you're monetizing your gaming skills. So I
Mm-hmm.
invested heavily in that space because I believe in it, and I think eventually all these roads do lead to people hanging out and doing family reunions while they're all over the world inside of a digital, conference room. But I think it's going to take a long time to get there.
Yeah.
I hope that
Absolutely.
answered the question.
No, and I think that was a good question that you asked. Like, what are you doing?
Right. Like,
Like what are you doing in the metaverse? And um the answer that you're posing, like the shopping experience, like that's a good answer, I think. And another answer, like some buddies of mine are developing a software that allows you to brainstorm
right.
in a virtual setting where you're like brainstorming, collaborating, building
It's like
ideas together
synergistic. You
in
know
a
what I mean? You're feeding off each other.
exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
But
situations like that make sense.
I don't just build chicks. I'm like, hey, this looks cool. I'm like, hey, what problem are we solving? Like, if we're not
Mm-hmm.
solving a real world problem that's a serious issue, then I don't have any interest. Like for Axie Infinity, the play to earn, you ever heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
So there at any given time, like when that thing was hot, there was 3 million users playing that game because they were making so much money. You go to like the Decentraland or Sandbox, there might be like 80 people hanging out in the whole world because there's nothing to do. What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not
Everyone's
making
just kind
money.
of
If anything, you're spending money. But it's
mm-hmm.
just we gotta baby step into that. Like you got to have other things other reasons
Mm-hmm.
that pull you into a digital world. It's not just going to be because you feel like hanging out. So
Yeah.
I think shopping, a better retail experience, play to earn gaming, a virtual reality type of entertainment, like things like that will
Mm-hmm.
probably be what pulls us in. And then people get very accustomed to it and they start hanging out there. And like I said before, listen, I love the real world. I love real experiences. Like I'm not the guy, but I see where things are heading and I'm betting on it.
Mm-hmm.
But for online shopping, I'd love a more immersive experience. I don't want to buy clothes on a flat screen where like I'd rather have an avatar inside of a virtual mall and he has the same exact dimensions I do. So when I try on a pair of clothes with that avatar, I know exactly how it's going to fit on me when it shows up in my house.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a game changer. Like You know, my girlfriend orders a bunch of clothes online and has to return 70% of them because they don't fit her right.
Yeah.
So,
Are there any limitations to the shopping experience? So like as people are buying things online, especially when it comes to the cannabis, are there any
well,
like
yeah,
limitations based on where people live?
yeah, of course. You got your geotagged, right? So, like, you
Mm-hmm.
can't be in Ohio and order cannabis in California. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to be in California to shop in California dispensary. So there will be no crossing of state lines until the federal government allows us to do so. So you're kind of geo boxed into whatever jurisdiction or state you live in and the legalities of that state.
Oh,
But
okay.
in the future, I could see this being the front end retail component of cannabis, and there's just massive distribution centers in strategic locations that just distribute, similar to the Amazon
Yeah.
model with the big fulfillment warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I foresee brick and mortar retail shopping becoming archaic over the next 10 to 15 years. I see it becoming a thing of the past, and it's a waste of time. It's not efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the biggest part. Like, yeah, there's always the argument of like, taking away from a real life experience, but like the experience of going to the mall, sitting down, spending time with your friends, this kind of thing.
Yeah, that but
But
like
how much?
when when I was a kid, the mall was the spot. Like there
Yeah.
was celebrities that show up there, like the Saved by the Bell tour back in the day. It was a big malls were like the hangout for middle school kids, like middle aged kids. If you go to a mall now, like it doesn't look anything like when I was a kid. You know, kids are at
Yeah.
home with their iPads and their
Mm-hmm.
iPhones and they're chilling. They're doing their Snapchat and Twitch
Mm-hmm.
and whatever else they do, right? So like
Yeah.
just things are changing and
Yeah.
malls were dope. I loved going to the mall. I used to
Mm-hmm.
beg my mom to drive me my friends to the mall, but I just don't see that same thing going on anymore really like I did.
Yeah. And what my answer to that is always that it's a new generation and a lot of people are meeting online. They're encountering online and they're looking
Right.
forward to that moment when they meet in person. It makes that moment when you meet someone in person that much more special because you might have met, in Cannaland or on some other online platform and got to know each other like personality wise a little bit just through conversation or through each other's avatars or that kind of thing. And then you end up going to the same conference because you have similar interests or you actually put in the effort to like meet this person, like go visit them or meet up somewhere. And like those moments are special for this new generation that's coming up, and it's just a new way of like meeting and socializing. It's just different. Like it doesn't mean it's better or worse.
Right. It's like, is that taking away from the actual human interaction? Are there less human interactions than there were before? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, it's vice versa. Like you might meet someone in person, but then you start texting or you start like
Right,
messaging,
right,
and
right.
it goes both ways, right? So in this case, it's just putting virtual first and making it easier for people to connect in a
Yeah,
virtual setting,
you
not
definitely
only with other people but with brands, products, all of those things.
yeah, you have the opportunity to connect with so many more people and things than you would otherwise. You could never create
Mm-hmm.
that footprint in real life without the digital connectivity of it. You're right. I never thought
Yeah.
about it like that, but you're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that to me is really like the reason and the
Yeah.
counter argument for anything that they might say as far as like why it's not good or it's different or it's like limiting human connection. I would say it's kind of the opposite. You
Right.
just have to look at it from a bit of a different lens.
Yeah, you just got to turn it the other way, right? You got to flip the camera
Mm-hmm.
around, but it makes a lot of sense. Like you can connect with so many more people and things, like in different countries, different cultures, different worlds
Mm-hmm.
that you would have never even known existed otherwise. So, no, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
And I think that's really driven by fear. People see something new that they don't necessarily understand. They think it's taking over humanity or that it's limiting people from connecting with one another, but it might actually be amplifying it,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I think you're onto something here.
Yeah, I mean, I work a lot. I'm here in Miami working in Web3 and crypto quite a bit. So it's like I'm excited to be in the space. I work a lot I'll come from traditional product design, working with cannabis companies.
Okay.
But getting into Web3, especially on the creative side, has opened my eyes to so much, especially
Totally.
in like the past couple of years. And so it's I definitely see the future in it for sure. So it's really a privilege to talk to you today and for our listeners to hear from you. So thank you for being
Hey,
on the show.
My pleasure, my man. Anytime.
Absolutely. So where do we learn more about Cannaland, or where can our listeners go to visit and find out more information?
There's a website, cannaverse.io. There's social media pages, TikTok, Instagram, and I think they're just Cannaland, I believe. And then yeah, I would just stay in tune with those social channels and that website, and we'll, as we make progress, we'll be giving the community updates, and we should be launching the token soon, and we're working on building out the Web3 metaverse as well.
Well, I, for one, I'm looking forward to all of that. And I think our listeners will be too after they hear this episode, for sure.
That's what's up.
So you can download episodes of Design This Beyond the Dieline. Look for all of our episodes by going to cannabisradio.com or subscribe to this show on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Until next time, always think beyond the Dieline.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.